The 2026 FIFA World Cup kicks off in 22 days. 22 days, that's it. After years of planning, qualifiers across every continent, 500 million ticket requests, and more pre-tournament conversation than any World Cup in history, we are 3 weeks away from the opening whistle in Mexico City. And yet, right now, on May 20th, 2026, this tournament is carrying more unresolved questions into its opening ceremony than any World Cup most of us can remember. Not questions about who wins, that's the fun part. Questions about whether teams can actually get there. Questions about whether fans can afford to be in the stadiums. Questions about whether the biggest tournament in football history is going to feel like the biggest tournament in football history, or whether it's going to feel like something else entirely. Because here's the thing, FIFA 2026 was built on a promise. The promise was simple: more teams, more countries, more people included in the greatest show on earth. 48 nations, 104 matches, 3 host countries, 16 cities, the most inclusive World Cup ever. That was the promise, but in the weeks and days leading up to June 11th, 3 very specific problems have emerged, each one serious on its own, and together they're reshaping what this tournament might actually look and feel like. So today we're going to walk through all 3. We're going to look at what's actually happening, why it matters, and what it means for the football. We're not here to be dramatic, we're here to be honest, because this is the biggest sports event on the planet, and it deserves a straight conversation. Let's get into it. Problem 1. Iran, conflict, and the question that wouldn't go away. This one starts in late February of this year, and when you hear it laid out, you'll understand why it became the defining off-pitch story of the entire tournament buildup. Iran qualified for the 2026 World Cup back in March 2025. It was their 7th qualification in history, and they were drawn into Group G alongside Belgium, New Zealand, and Egypt. Their 3 group stage matches were all scheduled on the west coast of the United States, Inglewood, California, and Seattle. The fixtures were set, the preparations were underway. Then, on February 28, 2026, a conflict broke out between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other. The strikes began on a Saturday. Within days, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, had been killed in the operation. And suddenly, the 2026 World Cup had a problem that nobody had planned for. The president of Iran's Football Federation, Mehdi Taj, went on state television and said it in plain terms. After what had happened, they could not be expected to look forward to the World Cup with hope. Iran's sports minister went further. He announced on state television on March 11th that the country could not participate, calling it unthinkable to travel to and compete in the United States given the circumstances. Now, think about what that means for a moment. A nation that had qualified, drawn their group, prepared their squad, suddenly facing the real possibility of not being at the World Cup at all, not because of anything that happened on a football pitch, because of a war that broke out 100 days before the tournament. FIFA moved quickly. Gianni Infantino confirmed publicly that Iran would compete, saying it loud and clear: Iran is participating in FIFA 2026, and they will play in the United States of America. He followed that up with a meeting with President Trump on March 10th, after which Trump confirmed the Iranian team was welcome to compete. He did add in a separate post that it might not be appropriate for them to be there for their own safety, a comment that Iran's football authorities responded to by asking FIFA to remove the United States as a host nation entirely. That request was denied. Behind the scenes, negotiations continued for weeks. Iran asked for their matches to be moved from U.S. soil to Mexico. There were discussions, reports, meetings. The situation shifted almost daily. Then, just 4 days ago, on May 16, 2026, FIFA Secretary General Matthias Grafström flew to Istanbul to meet personally with Iranian Football Federation officials. The purpose of that meeting was to offer reassurance about Iran's participation. FIFA confirmed it was working with relevant authorities to ensure all teams could compete in a safe environment. As of today, May 20th, 2026, Iran's participation is still officially confirmed. Their matches are still on the schedule. But the situation remains sensitive, and the word confirmed has felt more fragile around this story than it normally does. And there's another layer here that's worth understanding. Iran's Football Federation president, Mehdi Taj, was refused entry to Canada just weeks ago when he tried to attend the FIFA Congress in Vancouver. The reason? His links to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which both the United States and Canada classify as a terrorist entity. The man leading Iran's Football Federation couldn't enter one of the host countries to attend an official FIFA event. Here's the interesting part. Iran was one of the first nations to qualify for this World Cup. They did everything right on the football side. Their players, including striker Mehdi Taremi, who is one of the most recognizable names in international football, prepared for months. And now, with 22 days to go, their entire involvement in the tournament is still shadowed by circumstances that have nothing to do with football. If Iran does participate and plays those matches in Los Angeles and Seattle, it'll be one of the most extraordinary moments of sporting resilience the World Cup has ever seen. If they withdraw, and that remains a possibility that hasn't fully disappeared, it'll be the first team to pull out of a World Cup since 1950, and the circumstances will be unlike anything in modern football history. The last time a national team withdrew from a FIFA World Cup was over 70 years ago in a tournament held in the aftermath of the Second World War. That context tells you everything about how rare and how serious this kind of situation really is. However this resolves, it'll be part of FIFA 2026's story. That much is already certain. Problem 2. Mexico, security, and the shadow over Guadalajara. While the Iran situation was developing, another story was unfolding in one of the 3 host countries, and it brought a very different kind of concern to the tournament. On February 22nd, the Mexican military carried out an operation in the state of Jalisco that resulted in the death of Nemesio Oseguero Cervantes, known as El Mencho, the leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, one of the most powerful and violent criminal organizations in Mexico. His killing was a major law enforcement achievement, and it immediately triggered a wave of retaliatory violence across the country. More than 70 people were killed in attacks in the days that followed. Buses and businesses were set on fire. Gunmen blocked major highways across multiple states. Over 200 flights to Jalisco were canceled or diverted. The chaos centered in Guadalajara, the capital of Jalisco state. The same Guadalajara that is set to host 4 FIFA World Cup matches this summer. The Estadio Akron in Guadalajara, officially called Akron Stadium for the tournament, is a World Cup venue. One of those 4 matches is Uruguay versus Spain, one of the most anticipated group stage fixtures of the entire tournament. Hundreds of thousands of international fans are expected in that city. Security analysts were direct about the nature of the threat. Tim Meehan, a security expert who spoke publicly in the aftermath, described the Jalisco New Generation Cartel as among the most violent and best-armed criminal organizations in Mexico. He said the scale of the retaliation surprised him. The bigger concern he and others raised was what happens now that El Mencho is gone. He left no clear successor. His son is imprisoned in the United States. His brother and stepson never built significant influence among other cartel commanders. What analysts described as a broken succession line means the cartel could fracture, which sounds like it should be good news, but in practice can mean smaller, competing factions fighting for territory, which often generates more unpredictable violence than a single organized structure. There were 3 scenarios being discussed by security analysts: a smooth internal transition, a limited power struggle between factions, or a full fracture that invites rival cartels to move into Jalisco territory. Now, to be clear, and this matters, the violence subsided significantly in the weeks that followed. Airlines resumed flights to Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta. The Jalisco governor publicly ruled out any possibility of the city being dropped from the tournament. FIFA's Infantino said he was very reassured by Mexico's response and had total confidence in President Claudia Sheinbaum and the Mexican authorities. Mexico's government has committed to a massive deployment of military and security forces for the tournament. They have experience hosting large international events. Guadalajara itself is a major city with significant infrastructure, and importantly, Mexico City and Monterrey, the other 2 Mexican host cities, are not in Jalisco and were largely unaffected by the February violence. But here's the bigger issue. The question isn't whether the Mexican government will deploy resources. They clearly will. The question is whether international fans, many of whom will be making travel decisions based on news they've seen over the past 3 months, feel confident enough to book flights and hotels to Guadalajara. And that's a much harder thing to guarantee. The Portuguese Football Federation came out publicly in March, saying they were closely monitoring the situation and would make security the deciding factor in whether their players participated in planned warm-up activities in Mexico. Other federations made similar quiet assessments. For fans, the calculation is more personal still. Think about what the World Cup in Mexico is supposed to represent. Guadalajara is a football city with a genuine passion for the game. Chivas de Guadalajara, Club Deportivo Guadalajara, is one of the most beloved clubs in Mexican football history. The stadium they play in, the Estadio Akron, is a proper football atmosphere. For Uruguay fans, for Spain fans, for the traveling supporters who dreamed of being there. The experience was supposed to be unforgettable for the right reasons. Mexico is contributing 13 of the 104 matches of the tournament. It's not a peripheral part of FIFA 2026, it is central to the character of this tournament. The atmosphere in Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey is something genuinely distinctive. The noise, the color, the intensity of Mexican football support. That atmosphere is one of the reasons this co-hosting arrangement is exciting. What FIFA and the Mexican government need to deliver in the next 3 weeks is simple to describe and genuinely difficult to achieve. A visible, credible security presence that makes fans feel not just theoretically safe, but actually comfortable. The stadium experience itself will likely be fine. The question is the journey there and back, the transport, the street-level atmosphere, the sense that the city is under control. Mexico has hosted World Cup matches before. It has the experience, but it has never hosted them in these specific circumstances, just a few months after a violent cartel upheaval of this scale, and the eyes of the football world will be watching from June 11th onwards. Problem 3. The ticket and cost crisis that FIFA still hasn't solved. This is the problem that affects the most fans, not fans from specific countries, not fans planning to travel to specific cities, all fans, everywhere, trying to get access to the biggest football tournament on earth. Let's start with a number that tells the story immediately. The most expensive ticket available for the World Cup final at MetLife Stadium on July 19th, $11,000. A single ticket for one match, $11,000. At Qatar 2022, the most expensive seat at the final cost approximately $1,600. That was already the subject of significant criticism. FIFA 2026 has set a new ceiling that is nearly 7 times higher. But it's not just the final. This pricing structure runs throughout the tournament. Category 1, the best standard seats, for marquee matches involving Argentina, Brazil, England, or the United States can reach thousands of dollars at face value before the secondary market gets involved. Even the cheapest available seats for certain matches start at $380. Now, there's a specific context that FIFA always mentions when this comes up. The United States is the most commercially developed entertainment market in the world. Ticket prices for the NFL, NBA, and major events in American sport are high by international standards. Infantino has made this point directly. He said, "We have to apply market rates." He's also said in a remark that generated significant backlash that fans should not worry about ticket prices because you pay more for a hot dog at sporting events. That comment did not land well, at all. The reason it didn't land well is that the World Cup is not a domestic sporting event for a domestic audience. It's a global tournament that is supposed to belong to the whole world. And when a Senegalese fan or a Bolivian fan or an Egyptian fan, the very supporters of the newly included nations that FIFA pointed to when selling the 48-team expansion, looks at a ticket price of $500, $800, $1,000 before flights and hotels and daily costs are factored in, the tournament stops being for them. It stops being the most inclusive World Cup ever. It starts being an event they watch on television, like every World Cup before it, while FIFA counts the revenue. Here's where things get particularly interesting. FIFA introduced what they're calling a front category ticket tier just weeks ago, a new, even more expensive band of seats at the very best positions. The New York Times and The Athletic reported on this, and the response from fans was immediate and furious. U.S. lawmakers, members of Congress, wrote formally to FIFA calling on the organization to lower its prices, saying that dynamic pricing had turned the World Cup into, quote, an exclusionary enterprise at the expense of fans. When elected representatives of the host country are writing letters asking a sports organization to make its tickets more affordable, that's not a small thing. That's a public breakdown of what a global tournament is supposed to represent. FIFA's own resale platform, which FIFA controls and from which FIFA takes a 15% fee on the buying and selling side, lists most available seats well above the $1,000 mark. On the secondary market in the United States and Canada, where there is no price cap, resale markups of 4 times the face value have been reported. In Mexico, tickets can only be resold at face value or below, which is a notably different policy for the same tournament. There's another number that tells an important story. FIFA originally described April 1st as the 4th and final ticket sales window. They subsequently launched a 5th phase. Right now, with less than 40 days until the opening match, over 80 group stage games still have tickets available. FIFA says that's part of a planned last-minute sales strategy. Others read it differently, as a sign that the pricing model created a ceiling that real fans aren't willing to cross. Football Supporters Europe, the organization that represents fan groups across the continent, filed a formal complaint with the European Commission, accusing FIFA of abusing its market position. FIFA Secretary General Grafstrom, speaking at the FIFA Congress in Vancouver earlier this month, acknowledged the criticism and confirmed that the organization would review its ticket sales strategy for the 2030 World Cup. He was clear, they're listening and things will change. For 2026, too late. And that's the honest truth of problem 3. The decisions were made, the pricing structure is set, the window to change it for this tournament is closed. What FIFA can perhaps do in the remaining weeks is ensure that Category 4 supporter seats, the most affordable tier, are distributed through national federations to genuine fans rather than resellers. What it cannot do is undo the public image damage of a tournament that became synonymous with unaffordability months before the first goal was scored. The 1994 World Cup, the last time the United States hosted, set the all-time attendance record with 3.5 million spectators. FIFA has consistently said they expect to break that record this summer. With over 5 million tickets sold out of a projected total exceeding 6 million, they may well do it. The numbers look strong. But breaking an attendance record and delivering an accessible, inclusive, truly global World Cup experience are two different things. One is a commercial metric. The other is a promise that FIFA made to the football world when it announced the 48-team format. And right now, in May 2026, the gap between that promise and the reality on the ground is something that fans have noticed, loudly. The bigger picture, what all 3 problems have in common. Here's what's worth saying before we reach the conclusion. These 3 problems, Iran's participation uncertainty, Mexico's security challenges, and the ticket and cost crisis, are different in their nature and their origins, but they share something underneath. They all point to the gap between the scale of ambition that FIFA brought to 2026 and the complexity of delivering on that ambition in the real world. A 48-team tournament across 3 countries and 16 cities involving political tensions between host nations and competing nations, layered with commercial decisions that prioritize revenue over access, that's an enormous undertaking, and the pressure points it creates are real. The football will be extraordinary. The matches will happen. Lionel Messi, in what is almost certainly his final World Cup, will take to the pitch. Spain, France, Argentina, Brazil, England, the world's great football nations will compete. New stories will emerge from the newly included nations. There will be upsets, drama, goals, and moments that the world remembers for decades. But the story of this tournament will be told in 2 parts. One part will be on the pitch, and the other part, the part that FIFA will spend years reflecting on, will be everything that surrounded it. Would any of these 3 problems on their own have been enough to define FIFA 2026? Probably not. Together, they create something more significant, a picture of a tournament that stretched itself in size, in commercial ambition, in geopolitical complexity, perhaps slightly further than its foundations could comfortably support. What happens next, in the 22 days between now and June 11th, will matter. If Iran confirms its participation definitively and arrives safely, if Guadalajara's security holds and the city delivers the atmosphere it's capable of, if FIFA finds ways to get affordable tickets into the hands of real fans for the remaining matches, then the opening ceremony will feel like a fresh start, and the football will take over. That's the best-case scenario, and it's genuinely possible. The realistic scenario is something in between. Some of these tensions persisting in the background while the football itself pulls the world's attention to what's happening on the pitch. That's how most World Cups work. The noise off it eventually gets drowned out by the noise inside the stadiums. So, the three biggest problems FIFA 2026 is carrying into its opening match on June 11th. Iran's participation, confirmed on paper, fragile in practice, surrounded by a geopolitical situation that has no precedent in the modern history of the World Cup. Mexico's security, a tournament host that has navigated genuine cartel violence in its own territory just months before welcoming millions of international fans, and now faces the challenge of delivering safety and confidence in the final stretch. And the ticket and cost crisis, a pricing structure that FIFA has already acknowledged will need to change for 2030, while ordinary fans in 2026 face the most expensive World Cup in history. These are real problems. They deserve honest conversation. And they also exist alongside something that never goes away: football's ability to cut through everything else and remind us why we care. So I want to know what you think. Out of these three problems, which one concerns you most heading into the tournament? Is it the geopolitical uncertainty around Iran, the security questions in Mexico, or the sense that FIFA has built the biggest World Cup in history and made it too expensive for the fans who love it most? Drop your answer in the comments. I read all of them, and your perspective genuinely shapes the conversations we have on this channel. If this gave you something to think about, hit like. It costs nothing, and it helps this kind of analysis reach more people who care about football beyond just a results table. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we are covering this tournament all the way through to that final at MetLife Stadium on July 19th. 22 days, 3 problems still unresolved, 104 matches to come. This is FIFA 2026, and it's unlike any World Cup we've ever covered.